You're live, Chair.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, to the December Cabinet meeting. Welcome, and to our viewers. So let's get started straight away with the agenda. Do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Jones and Councillor Packer.
Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? Can you hear me? Any declarations of interest? No?
Do I, sorry, Chair, do I just need to mention my Director of NRL?
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah,
my Director of NRL.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stannard.
And Paul, presumably the same?
Yeah, I'll take that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public questions or petitions?
We don't, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And can we agree the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet held on the 11th of November 2020? Yeah? Okay, very good. Making good progress. So let's go into the agenda, page 17, which is the COVID Recovery Plan Progress Report. I'm going to say some introductory remarks, and I'm going to pass over to Stephen to flesh out some of the key areas contained in this paper to Cabinet. So colleagues will remember that we had a COVID recovery plan which came to the June Council. And it's one, if not the first recovery plan, I think that has been published, one of the first in the country. It is a living document for very obvious reasons, because it's a changing landscape with high degrees of uncertainty, and so it's a response to that changing environment. And the report is an update of progress against the objectives that we set. Now remember, there are two elements, and the first element is our response to the COVID pandemic, its impact on the city and on its citizens, its businesses, and the approaches that we've taken in partnership. And this document is freighted with partnership working. It's the only way that we can tackle this national challenge in a city context. The work that we've been doing over a number of years around the 2040 vision has paid significant dividends in numerous ways. And the strategy is to make sure that we engage with all of our citizens, providing good public health advice, but also working very hard to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people to sustain them through this difficult period, but also to think about how we re-emerge from the effects of the pandemic in terms of a recovery strategy and looking forward. So the first part of the report looks at a number of those impacts, personal tragedies of people who have contracted the virus, but in particular those who have died from it. It goes on to talk about how we have tried to make sure that people who are using the city are able to use it safely. And what I can say is that people in Norwich and people coming into Norwich have acted in a proportionate and responsible way in making sure that they follow the public health guidance, which helps to keep all of us safer and also keeps the level of active infection down to a level where we can remain in a tier which is not entirely a lockdown, which of course is the experience of many people across the country at the present time. Page 21 talks about recovery themes and actions, and the first of these is securing the council's finances. And this, I have to say, for tonight's cabinet papers, is a recurrent theme. The council has been extremely effective in dispersing, channeling funding that central government has sent us to support different sectors of the economy, and particularly the most vulnerable. But we have also added in our own resources and our own local and well-tried and tested infrastructure to provide additional and crucial support. Our one major concern around the issue of council funding is not the funding that we're getting to deal with immediate effects of the pandemic. We've been successful in getting resources to make sure that we can respond to those immediate things. It's actually the longer term and the government's continued failure to recognise that it needs to refund and support councils for the full costs of COVID if we are going to remain the effective partner that they need to move forward with, but also secondly, to provide the services that people need more than ever. I don't think the council's reputation has been any higher than it is now, given that people recognise the range of work that we are doing with them, with our partners, and with our local communities and volunteers. It's been a real city-wide effort. Going on to page 23, we're all sensing that change is not going to be something of a temporary thing. It is going to be something which is going to see a permanent change, new different directions. And so the document picks up how we modernise our council, how we re-equip ourselves, how we think about how local services will be delivered to our residents. And so there are a number of key changes which are identified in the report around the use of IT, how we interact with our citizens, how we upskill our workforce, and how we make sure that we always look to supporting the most vulnerable people in the community. What it has highlighted also, of course, is some of the trends that we have known about for, frankly, many years, and some of those are the impact on widening inequalities, the impact on the strain on the social security system, a number of significant weaknesses within that. So there are a number of things that we will need to advocate for to government to improve where there have been failings in the current national arrangements and national systems. And the significant piece on business and the local economy, working with our other partners, Business Improvement District, Chamber of Commerce, individual businesses, social enterprises, to make sure that the business economy is supported through this really difficult time, but also to start thinking about what an economy that benefits everybody would look like. And so the establishment of the Good Economy Commission, in addition to the work that we're doing around the City Vision Steering Group, is central to some of that new thinking. And we've had successes with the town's investment plan, which of course has come to this committee before in previous reports, I think last month. So the document lays out a strong set of proposals about how we move this forward around skills and enterprise, urban regeneration, significant work around housing regeneration and development, and of course some of the key sectors that we are very strongly invested in around the arts, the culture, and the heritage, which I think is one of the central themes of the document in terms of that investment moving forward. The cultural heritage and the cultural creativity of the city is a vital part of our vibrancy as a place. and there's references to the establishment of Cultural Compact Board. We've had the launch of the 5-year environment strategy, work done around the environment as an integral part of the work of the recovery plan. So we have reports this evening which touch on some of those, including one that Councillor Stannard will be picking up around a fresh look at a radical prospectus around transport in the city and its links with the rest of the region. And one thing that has come through is a whole range of hyper-local activity, community support, which has been absolutely vital in providing community resilience. The work that's been done by the voluntary sector with the involvement of the City Council around the Food Poverty Action Plan. Councillor Davis has been very closely involved in that, both on the front line and in policy development at a strategic level. And the paragraph 82, the Vision COVID Recovery Group, just shows you the range of partners involved in the work of this recovery programme. So it tells a very strong story. That partnership is going to be needed going forward. It is not a set of, as we know, temporary arrangements, because the work of 2040 is embedded in the corporate policies of this council as well as its wider city remit. So this is not just for Christmas, as they say. This is for life, because this is the way we're going to be working as a council going forward on behalf of the citizens of the city. And this is a very good snapshot of where we are as we come to the end of 2020. So I'm going to ask Stephen now if he would like to add any points.
Thank you, Leader. So in June, Norwich City Council became one of the first local authorities in the country to publish a comprehensive COVID-19 recovery plan. Having spent the first 3 months of the pandemic responding to vulnerable people and businesses who needed our help, we wanted the council to look ahead at an early stage to the actions needed to help shape our recovery, whilst continuing to deliver against our stated priorities. And the plan is our mechanism for doing that. What the report before Cabinet demonstrates is that over the past 10 months, not only has the council continued to respond to the evolving needs of our residents and businesses, but that as an organisation, we've continued to deliver our stated priorities despite the challenges the virus has presented. So before running through a few of the highlights of how we've progressed against our recovery plan, I just wanted to say a few words about the impact the virus is continuing to have. And whilst numbers in Norwich and Norfolk have consistently remained below many other parts of the country, the fact remains that the virus is still with us and continues to affect how we all live our lives. Until the vaccine rollout is widespread, the most effective way to manage the virus is to suppress it through our actions and behaviours. Nearly 65,000 people have lost their lives to COVID in the UK since the outbreak of the pandemic. In Norfolk, the total is 577. Sadly, those numbers will continue to rise. With very few exceptions, the way the people of Norwich have dealt with the past 10 months has been exemplary. And on behalf of the City Council, I wanted to say thank you for the sacrifices made. I also want to take the opportunity as we approach Christmas to thank my colleagues across the council, so many of whom have gone above and beyond this year to provide the services the city needs whilst dealing with the impact COVID has had on their own lives and families. Sadly, there are people out there who seek to deny COVID exists or spread false stories across social media about the virus and the vaccine. To these people, I say your actions are both dangerous and irresponsible. Turning to the council's response, over the past few months, we've put in place a range of new measures to keep the city safe as part of a comprehensive action plan owned by local partners. Since the end of the most recent lockdown and throughout the Christmas period, we'll have a team of 26 officers and security personnel deployed in shifts across the city to support visitors and businesses. To my knowledge, this is the most comprehensive support team in Norfolk. In addition, there remains a comprehensive winter support package available for residents who feel unready to stop shielding as well as a new winter fund to provide food, fuel payments, and living allowances. Our local efforts to put in place enhanced contact tracing have also shown to be effective, with a recent study by the Nuffield Trust rating the Norfolk contact tracing system as the most successful in the country. At the foundation of the Council's recovery is the need to put our finances on a sustainable footing. The Council's draft budget will be discussed later in the meeting, so I won't preempt that now, but I wanted to make a few points. Whilst the government has provided local authorities with additional resources since the spring, the amount provided this year and next year falls short of what's required. At the start of the pandemic, the government told councils they would be fully compensated for the financial impacts of COVID. That commitment remains unfulfilled. It also remains deeply unhelpful that local government has been provided with a succession of one-year settlements over the past few years, which makes it very difficult to plan ahead with any degree of assurance. However, despite the challenges, we've made significant progress since the summer to shore up our finances. In June, we were forecasting an overspend this year of 7 million. Since then, we've identified over 3 million of short-term savings whilst protecting local services. Through these efforts, combined with additional funding from Whitehall, we're now forecasting to come in on budget this year. And whilst I'm pleased to be able to report that we've stuck to our word on the budget, it does remain the case that as a council we've had to reduce spending by £3 million this year whilst responding to the pandemic. In terms of the future of the services we provide, the recovery plan was clear that the way in which teams across the council responded to the first national lockdown, finding new ways to deliver existing services and designing new ones from scratch around the needs of our most vulnerable residents, provides us with an opportunity. The opportunity to build on that approach and apply it to the way we deliver other services, to create a council and local services that are agile and in tune with the changing behaviours and needs of our residents. To put this ambition into practice, a series of service reviews have commenced, which build on the lessons from COVID. Based on the ideas developed through these reviews, works commenced to reshape our council-wide transformation programme and put in place the necessary capability to deliver change at scale and at pace. Turning to the support we've provided to our most vulnerable residents, one of the things I've been most proud of in my first 11 months as Chief Executive is our response to supporting the increasing number of people presenting as homeless. Through our multi-agency Pathways programme, the council accommodated 120 rough sleepers through the government's Everybody In emergency measures during the first lockdown. But we know that keeping people in emergency accommodation is a problem, which is why we moved quickly to support people into more sustainable arrangements. I'm pleased to say that of those 120 people moved into emergency accommodation, 104 have now moved into more settled accommodation. But we want to go further than just providing people with a home. We want to create opportunity. This is why, working closely with County Council, other districts, public health, and the DWP as part of the No Homelessness in Norfolk programme, we're working to ensure wraparound support services are in place to help turn lives around over the longer term and create pathways out of poverty. Since March, colleagues from across the organisation have continued to work hard to support local businesses, which have been particularly hard hit. To date, the council has overseen the distribution of £40 million in grants to approximately 3,000 businesses. And looking ahead, we'll build on our success as the highest performing authority in Norfolk when it comes to business grants, as we support businesses impacted by the current tiering restrictions. In October, the council received formal approval from government of the £25 million town deal and a £1 million accelerated payment for spending this year on infrastructure priorities. Norwich is one of only 4 places across the country to receive the full £25 million in the first tranche of town deals, and this has a potential to be a real game changer for the city. Our COVID recovery plan places regeneration of brownfield sites and the building of new homes, particularly council homes, at the front and centre of our longer term recovery from COVID. And I'm pleased to be able to report good progress made across a range of priority areas. In terms of East Norwich, the region's biggest regeneration opportunity, which has the potential to create 4,000 new homes and 6,000 new jobs, The East Norwich Partnership Board began meeting in July to oversee the master planning process, and we're currently out to tender to procure master planning partners, with a proposal due to come to Cabinet in February for approval. With regards to the Council's wholly owned property company, Norwich Regeneration Limited, a more detailed update will be discussed later in this agenda, but I'm pleased to be able to report continued strong demand for the energy efficient homes built by NRL. Since July, all 39 properties released for sale by NRL have been reserved by prospective purchasers, with further properties to be released to market soon. Finally, as reported to Cabinet last month, work continues at pace to deliver up to 300 council homes across a number of sites in the city, including Mile Cross, Argyle Street, Threescore and Threescore in Bothorpe, with construction due to commence next summer at Threescore and later in the year at the other sites. Turning to climate change and the green economy, in August, the Council published its latest 5-year environmental strategy, comprising all major campaigns and priorities for the forthcoming period, and highlighting our recent progress. The strategy sets out a new work programme and target to make the Council's carbon emissions net zero by 2030, building on a string of recent successes. Most recently, the Council has been recognised as one of the top performing councils in the country by Friends of the Earth for its response to the climate change emergency. And as a council, we'll continue to build on our strong track record of success by identifying further opportunities to reduce emissions across council assets and operations, which have resulted in a 62% reduction since 2007. To finish on a note of optimism, the recent commencement of the vaccine rollout is the route through to a return to normality for the city. The City Council is working closely with partners from across the counties to support the successful rollout of the months ahead. So in summary, despite the many challenges, I'm pleased to report to Cabinet the significant progress which has been made across all areas of the recovery plan since it was agreed back in June. We'll continue to track progress and report back to Cabinet next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Open up to Cabinet members for any comments. Karen?
Thank you. Thank you, Alan and Stephen, for a very comprehensive report. I wanted to publicly thank our Revs and Bens department for all the work they've done helping individuals with the self-employed support scheme, the council tax reduction scheme and the £500 self-isolation grant. This has really been a lifesaver for an awful lot of people, and I really appreciate that they have done this on top of all of their ordinary work with very little resource. People have really gone over and above to actually make sure that people have got money in their pockets and food on their tables. I'd also like to thank the communities team for all the work they've done with the Norwich Food Network. They've worked fantastically with all of the food banks. They've linked us all up together. They've made sure that every area in Norwich has been covered so that people are getting the food they need. And also we've been fortunate enough to have the Financial Inclusion Consortium in place, which means that we've been able to refer people through to specialist welfare benefits and debt advice. And I think Stephen's quite right. We have not seen the money we've been promised from the government coming back. But if it wasn't for councils across the country, people would have been homeless, people would have been hungry, people would have been in enormous amounts of debt. And I really think, you know, it's not too much to ask to actually be properly funded for keeping people alive during the COVID crisis. Thank you.
Very well said, Councillor Davis. Councillor Maguire. Yeah. You're still muted. That's it. You're there.
Right. No, thanks. I what I want to emphasise is, and I'm so pleased to see the role of the environment, the green economy, and the whole climate change address being a major part of this whole recovery plan. And what I'm really pleased, again, and I know I go on about this, but we're doing this in an integrated manner. So all of our policies fit together. We don't try and rush ahead and just save the environment and let the people die of starvation, being somewhat excessive in my language, but rather by taking an integrated approach, we will achieve what we're trying to achieve. We will achieve it well. And I will say more later on, but I must say, Stephen, to steal a bit of my thunder in saying how well we are doing, we have done with Pathways, and we cannot speak too well of the team that have achieved that.
Thank you, Kevin. Gail.
I'd like to agree with you, Kevin. I think Alan and Stephen have covered the report off admirably, but I'd like to highlight obviously the importance of looking to the future, of us building new council houses, homes for people, communities for people, the difference that will make to people's lives, but also the kickstart to the local economy, which is really important. And I want to pay tribute to the housing team who have dealt so well with getting accommodation for rough sleepers, but also dealing with their everyday job. That department has been under real pressure, and I'd have to say that all of the City Hall staff have just performed so well as a team. I see it, twice a week in team meetings, all pulling together and doing the very best we can for our residents. And I was talking to somebody in the street this morning, and he asked me to pass on to the team, to all of the staff, to say what a wonderful job he thought the council were doing. So I'll do that publicly, because it's really nice to get that acknowledgement. And you have, a wonderful, wonderful effort. We've got a long way to go, but the residents are really helping us. They're trying to keep themselves safe, to keep us all safe. So, thank you to everyone in Norwich.
Thanks very much, Gail, and that's a heartfelt thanks, which I'm sure we all share. Any other cabinet members want to make any comments? Sandra, James, Sandra, do you want to come in?
Please, yes. I've said it when it came to cabinet before. I think it's a really impressive document, and it's a clear vision for recovery. And I'd also like to join all the other colleagues in taking the opportunity to thank everyone who's been part of the COVID response and the recovery effort, because I know it's been a real mammoth task, and officers have really shown incredible amount of dedication and resilience. And I know everyone's tired, and we just really like to join in thanking everyone for this effort. And my question is a little bit of a broader one, so please bear with me. It sort of encompasses a number of work streams identified in the project. So the plan highlights a review of the Norwich economic strategy, and also outlines again the work to support the digital and creative economy. And I think it's absolutely right that we follow the trend and invest in the digital and creative economy. However, I don't think this focus alone will enable a recovery that benefits residents with a variety of different professional skills. And I'd like to quote the Organisation for Local Economies, which states that evidence from other parts of the UK suggests that approaches to local development that bet too heavily on such high-value, high-tech sectors as the route to prosperity often fail to benefit most local low-skilled residents. I don't think, labeling it low-skilled is very helpful, but it sort of gets the point across that that we need local development to benefit local residents with a variety of different skills. And the organisation therefore recommends that local councils support business models that will provide decent employment for people in especially the foundational sectors such as care and health services, for example. So could you explain a little bit more where in this strategy document we will look more towards these foundational sectors and include them in work streams going forward, please?
I can make an immediate response to that. A very thoughtful question, Sandra. Just to pick up the digital aspects of this, I think it is also as much about equipping people with the digital tools that they need. So a lot of work that's being done around digital inclusion, Laura Wigby's work in this field is particularly noteworthy. And we have taken the opportunity to work with residents as they've interacted with us during the COVID period, when it's not been possible to come into City Hall, to be comfortable with engagement in that way and picking up some of those issues. So I think investment in that area, it is going to be an important sector, but it's a kind of skill sets that everybody will need to a certain level of competence, and making that happen is particularly important. The Good Economy Commission, just to pick one initiative, is looking across the economy, and one piece of work which is on the cusp of being undertaken is asking people what their experiences of I suppose it's a slightly odd phrase, but the lived economy, what it's like for them, and what are the problems. And what we do know from research that we've already carried out is that work that we learnt to value, or were reminded to value during the first lockdown, clapping for carers and so on, has not, a bit like the council really, lots of praise, but less funding. And of course, the campaign around the living wage and living hours, whatever work people do, because all work is of value. There's no, and you would agree with this, I know, Sandra, there's no low value work. Our society only functions because everybody has an integral part to play. So I think, ideas around, what an inclusive economy should look like, and how we embed that and make that happen as a reality. We mustn't be just dazzled by the possibilities of technology. We really, there are grounded things that have to be done to make our society function in a compassionate and effective way. So any research of the kind that you've just touched on is really important in helping us to shape that part of the agenda. James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to add my thanks to those officers who've made this document happen. And I think one of the things that perhaps comes out from this is the range of work that has gone on throughout this pandemic and continues to go on, and that the council has continued to deliver for residents. And I think everyone needs to be congratulated on that. Scrutiny committee looked at the blueprint before it came to council back in June, and without committing next civic year's committee to any particular piece of work, I think it might be appropriate for the committee to have a one-year review of this document and feed that back into the process, which could potentially be quite helpful, I think. The leader has just talked about being dazzled by technology. Without wishing to be too dazzled by technology, there's one particular interest of mine. There's a reference in here in para 35 and the table under that about working with City Fibre and commencing rollout of full fibre broadband from next spring. It's worthwhile pointing out that in NR2, Openreach have already rolled out full fibre broadband, and it is available for install now. So although the council is doing some great things working with City Fibre, other things are happening in the city to deliver that as well. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's helpful to acknowledge that in our COVID recovery planning, just to make that point. So thank you for that. Okay, any further comments? So can we note the progress that's being made, and thanks and just to confirm, and I know Alex will have minuted it, our thanks to a tremendous amount of work that our colleagues in City Hall, our councillors, but more broadly, the different partners that we have across the city, the voluntary groups. What a great job everyone's been doing, and that will continue into 2021. Okay, so we can accept the recommendation. I think we need to indicate.
Let's have hands, people.
Yeah, Alex is the hand meister.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Good. You've got all those hands, have you, Alex? Alex hand. Well, you would, wouldn't you? Okay. Right. Let's move on. And we move on now to item 6, which has been trailed a little bit in the first paper of this evening, which is the emerging budget for 2021-22. And Councillor Kendrick is going to describe the report. Paul, you are muted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Technical problems. Despite government promises made in March that local government would be fully compensated for costs caused by the COVID crisis, this has not been the case. As a result of the second lockdown, has worsened the position of Norwich City Council and the local government sector in general. In Norwich, we have lost revenue from car parking. Rents from commercial properties are likely to be affected. There are added costs in the administration of grants to local businesses. This has led to very difficult problems for our budget. This is in the context of an almost 50% cut in government funding to English councils since 2010. The loss to Norwich is far greater. The fault here lies not with councils, but with the decisions made back in 2010 by the coalition government to heavily load the burden of austerity on local government. COVID has turned that longer-term problem into a short-term crisis. The pandemic and 2 lockdowns have both ramped up the demand for local government services and massively reduced councils' income. Inevitably, this has intensified the already dire financial pressures. Croydon is bankrupt. The South London Council issued a Section 114 notice, a formal declaration that it cannot meet its legal requirements to balance its books, and will halt all but essential spending. Croydon is far from alone. Councils across the country are having to introduce severe cuts, and a number are on the brink of declaring bankruptcy. Ironically, some of the biggest stresses can be found amongst Tory county councils. However, Labour-run cities are far from exempt. Luton, Manchester, Leeds and Liverpool are all planning deep cuts and redundancy programmes, and the impact has been deeply felt across the whole of England and the rest of the UK as devolved governments had to pass on to their councils some of the cuts they've received in funding from Westminster. Austerity has not ended under the Tories. In fact, it is becoming more brutal. Local government reorganisation will, after this present crisis is over, likely be firmly back on the agenda as the government's aim is to distract the sector, especially Tory councils, from the scandal, the gross underfunding of the local government sector. Given the level of cuts in frontline services seen in many other councils, often against their basic political instincts of those councils, they are being made forced to these cuts by cuts in government grants to local government. However, I'm proud to have worked with a financial team of officers who over the last few years have managed to protect our vital frontline services. Been achieved by prudence and good management of our finances, but also our commercial properties policies have helped raise substantial sums of money. Had we listened to the ill-informed opposition to this policy from the Green Party, we would indeed this year be looking to have to make major cuts in our frontline services. To look at the emerging budget in detail, the paper supports the launch of the public budget consultation, which will run from December 21st to January the 27th, by providing details of the initial proposals for budget savings, capital investments and the council tax for the next financial year. Spending review included a number of announcements impacting local authorities, which are set out in this report. Some initial estimates have been made about the financial impact on the council, but we are awaiting the provisional local government finance settlement to confirm specific grant allocations. Once again, the settlement will be a one-year allocation. This, combined with further delays to the fairer funding review, means significant uncertainty over future funding levels in the medium term. The budget proposes a 1.99% increase in the council tax, which will generate approximately £200,000 to the council. This would result in a Band D property, an increase of £5.36 per year or £10 a week, 10p a week, to a total of £274.74. The council has seen an increase in the ongoing budget gap due to the medium-term impact of COVID-19. A number of short-term growth items have been identified, with the council's car parking and rental incomes being most affected. Overall, the council's initial budget pool was of 5.87 million for the next financial year. This has been addressed through permanent savings of 1.94 million being identified. These are categorised into service transformations, budget rebasing, or revenue generation. Additional short-term options, such as changing the approach to funding the capital programme and reducing external borrowing costs. Use of general fund reserves of 1.99 million. While the one-year measure and use of reserves has assisted in settling a balanced budget, they do not address the structural financial gap over the medium term. The council has significant financial challenges and will require the cost-cutting services reviews drive forward savings options for future year. While service reviews will look at how services can be delivered differently and more effectively, it's likely, given the scale of the campaign, there will need to be in future years reductions in services capacities in some areas. In recognition of the increased financial risk, proposed to set up a specific risk reserve. It is intended that this reserve is funded from any revenue underspent in this financial year, as well as any additional budget benefits confirmed as part of the provisional finance settlement. Paper also contains proposed capital programme, which includes significant investment projects funded from Towns Fund grants, such as the East Norwich and the public realm improvements. 48.8 million investment in the housing revenue accounts, including new social housing projects and the continuation of home and community upgrade programmes. Due to the COVID pandemic, we have seen, unfortunately, a growth in unemployment, and this is likely to continue. But I am very proud to announce that for a further year, this Labour-controlled City Council is doing its bit to help those of our fellow citizens who relied upon benefits or are low pay. Norwich remains one of a handful of local councils that continue to offer 100% rebate on people's council tax bills if they are the poorest. In many Tory councils, even the poorest are being made to pay 30% of their council bills under their limited income. What of next year's budget? I fear it could be much tougher, unless central government properly funds local councils and allows us to provide the services that our local communities need. Local government has been a vital player in the COVID crisis. Without proper funding, we will be unable to meet the next crisis when it occurs. I ask members to approve this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Very, very comprehensive survey of the budget and the situation. So thank you for that. Are there any other portfolio holders who would like to make any points? Gail?
Yes, thank you, Paul. You obviously covered part of the HRA capital programme, but I mean, it's an incredible story for us that, you know, the figures in front of you for table 7, proposed HRA capital programme spend of 48,839,000 for the coming year. That is absolutely incredible. We know the importance of maintaining and improving our stock. We know the importance of people's communities and how they look, and we know that we need to build more high quality new social housing to benefit our tenants, to benefit the economy. There is so much good in this. I'm not going to go through it line by line because that will come in future council meetings. But I'm really proud to have this paper in front of us. The only correction I would make, and it's a very small correction, paragraph 58 says that all proposed HRA revenue budgets, the HRA capital programme and capital funding proposal will be incorporated into the HRR business plan projections, which will be reported to Cabinet in January 2021. I believe that is now going to be February. I will ask Louise to confirm that for me. But you know, really positive news for our HRA capital programme. So I'll leave it for people to take in the good work that's being done.
Thank you very much, Gail. Any other cabinet members at this point? I'm going to just to ask, so Annabelle, Hannah and Sean are with us this evening. I just wondered if there are any comments on the back of those two responses to the budget from Paul and from Gail that you wanted to pick up. So Annabelle, anything from you?
If you don't mind, Leader, thank you very much. I think Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Harris, though, have kind of taken my thunder a little bit, but there's just a couple of bits I might reiterate, if you don't mind, because we can't underestimate the challenge of what we've been doing, not only in year, but also the impact and how that flows into next year. So just to, you know, raise the number again, the COVID-19 impacts that we're looking at for 21-22 are over £3 million. Now, actually, if we take that in the context of that's a new pressure in the short term, and we look at how we've balanced our budget this year by drawing down just under 2 million, without that pressure, we'd be totally balanced and not pulling on reserves. And I think we have to remember those kind of big ticket numbers and how they come together. But we have got initial savings of ongoing identified of 1.9 million. We are looking at taking the council tax increase of 1.99%, but for us as authority in the city, if we don't take those opportunities, that money is gone forever, and it's really important that we do continue to secure revenue resources as we can. So when you're actually looking at the spending review data that we've got on page 42 of the report, it starts to talk about 4.5% in cash terms, but actually that's our core spending power. That is, though, coming from our ability to raise council tax. So it's not actually a real cash increase to us in that respect for the local people. It is, you know, they are funding some of that themselves. Our additional support, though, that's coming through is a little bit unclear still. We're still waiting for the final settlement figures to come through, which hopefully is tomorrow. But it shows how we've had to project, forecast, rework and reconsider absolutely everything within our financials without really knowing what our funding going forward will be. So I just want to highlight, really, we do put it in the introduction, but they are our initial proposals. These figures will change slightly by the time we come back to February, but it's a really positive position to be able to go into a consultation demonstrating that we can actually balance our overall position. On page 48, though, paragraphs 32 to 34, we do kind of highlight this managing risk. It's really important that we do reflect on what COVID has done to us financially this year and how we've had to respond. As Stephen highlighted in the report earlier, we've had to stop spending an awful lot of money, over £3 million in the city, to be able to respond to these challenges. So we are looking to create a risk reserve this year that will help us respond in future to risks associated with COVID. And that actually might mean that some of the COVID impacts are going to impact on our ability to deliver some of the savings we've got on the table going forward. But we really have, as a management team and with yourselves, taken forward the challenge, and we've built ourselves some stretch targets in there as well. So it's only appropriate that we give some consideration to actually how we'd manage it if we don't get all of those proposals across the line. And that's not unusual. It's an approach that's seen across the country now, and I think it's something that I'm really pleased that we're embracing here. It is lovely, though, to move on to the capital element, and I'm going to take it to the 5-year view. I know both Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Harris have mentioned the 1-year position, but actually, if you look at the general fund capital programme that we're putting forward here, it's a £44 million investment over the 5-year period. But what's also really, really good news that I think we need to share and celebrate is £30 million of that is secured through grants and contributions. So it shows the impact actually we're having in being able to bid for money and resources and bringing that into the city for investment. But you take the HRA figures, it's a £206 million programme over the 5 years. That is a very big investment programme, but it's something to be proud of. And I think that we as officers, and Louise will agree with me, that is the challenge in front of us now, is to make sure we can deliver that on your behalf. But it's kind of a nice way to finish the report, and I'll hand it back to yourself.
Thanks very much, Annabelle. Louise, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Nothing really to add to Annabelle's comments, just that, really pleased to see such an ambitious programme in place. And to confirm Councillor Harris's point, the HRA budget and business plan will come to February's Cabinet now.
Thanks very much, Louise. Any other Cabinet colleagues? Let me ask Sandra. Oh, Gail, did you want to come in first?
Only very quickly, I know that Karen is having real problems with her internet. She keeps getting knocked out. So just to be aware, really, Alan.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Gail. Thank you. Sandra.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan. First of all, just quickly, Councillor Kendrick, it's not my place here to start a political debate, but we will have plenty of time to do that in the full council meeting and discuss our differences in terms of commercial investment strategies, I'm sure. My question is around the HRA Capital Programme. It shows over the next 5 years that it's predicted to deliver between 328 and 378 new homes, and thereafter the modelling shows that the HRA can afford to develop approximately 50 to 75 dwellings per annum. Now, with council housing waiting lists in the gold and silver bands currently already running at 1,045 and set to increase, the programme capital can clearly not be sufficient to meet demand. A recent report commissioned by the LGA and social housing groups further finds that council house waiting lists in England are set to double next year. I appreciate that much of our ability to deliver housing needs is determined by government, but in light of these figures, I still need to ask if you expect that in the next years, will there be any further funding and opportunities to try and close this gap between increasing need and provision?
Thank you, Sandra. I'll start with Gail.
I mean, I would say, and the officers will say, that I will always push to build every home that we possibly can. But it has to be done within it has to have a business plan, it has to be done within the economic envelope. So we will do everything we can. I'm more than aware of the waiting lists, and they will not get easier. There's no way they're going to get easier. But we will strive to get the pipeline going and to build. And you know me well enough to know that is a of our group, that is a priority for us, and I know that all groups support us in the need to build more social housing.
Sorry, apologies. Yes, Gail, I was muted. Do you want to
I believe Karen is in the waiting room trying to get back in.
Okay, so hopefully Stuart will.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm attempting to get her to join, but it's taken a while. I think she's got some internet issues at home, which might be stopping her from joining. So I am on the case. Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the update, Gail.
James, any questions from you?
No, nothing at this stage on this item. Thank you.
Okay, I was doing some local government finance training for members last week, and as I was preparing it, I looked at the 2019 one-year settlement for local government, and then I looked at the 2020 one-year settlement for local government, and actually, if you were arriving, from Mars, and you were just coming down, and you had terrible, great interest in local government finance, you would think that nothing had changed. And yet, what we've been talking about tonight is just massive disruptive change, which has highlighted the crucial role of local government. I did, just while I was listening to colleagues go through the points, just type in the word Serco profits. And Serco profits, it's not Groundhog Day for them as it is for local government. They are set to soar after the test and trace contract extension So very quietly at Christmas, just keep an eye open for the amount of public bounty that will be finding its way into Serco shareholder profits. And I have no doubt that the directors of Serco will potentially benefit from that largesse as well. Can't be certain, but we can see. And this, of course, is the company which July of last year was fined something in the region of £20 million, involved as a serious fraud squad for the electronic tagging scandal. So there is a tale of two institutions. And maybe if we renamed ourselves Norwich City Council Serco Limited, some of that extra largesse might possibly come our way. But it is a grave concern that a poorly performing company in the past around the particular issue of electronic tagging, and let us say a less than stellar performance in terms of the national test and trace system, should have financial buoyancy beyond its highest expectations, whereas the City Council and many other local authorities across the country that Councillor Kendrick referred to by way of example are finding themselves hard pressed going forward to meet the challenges that this country faces. And I would like to think that government will, at the end of this year, reflect on the way it is distributing money and the best place it can be located. And one of those is obviously, next to the NHS and social care, the local authorities who have been the key partners. The final point I will make is this, that it's been an exceptional piece of work that's been carried out by officers to provide us with a stable budget and one that protects vital services in the coming year. But as Paul has indicated, as Annabelle has told us, there are significant challenges ahead, and the responsibility of government is to address those. And as the report has said, we have, the previous report as well has said that we have made those representations, and we will continue to do so as we move forward into 2020 to get what is absolutely essential, which is a sustainable system of local government finance. You know, it is the very basis of decent governance and underpins a civilized society. Right, okay, having got that off my chest, can we agree the recommendations on page 41? Hands up for Alex. Okay, good. Right, thank you very much. So let's now move on to item 7, which is on page 71 and is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review Report. And that's over to Councillor Kendrick.
I hope you can hear me now. I think I've sorted out the technical problems. The report details the results of the Council's Treasury management activities for the first 6 months of this financial year. Table 1 shows that the Council held 57.6 million of cash and short-term investments as of September the 30th. All investment transactions taken were within the approved limits laid out by the annual investment strategy. Table 2 shows actual borrowing as of September the 30th, totaling 219.9 million. Council has not borrowed to date this year, and no additional borrowing is forecast for the remainder of this financial year. As part of the spending review announcement, the government has confirmed that it will reform the Public Works Loan Board lending terms, ending the use of Public Works Loan Board's monies for investment properties bought primarily for yield. Alongside the spending review, the government has published revised lending terms for the PWLB and guidance to support local authorities to determine if a proposed project is the most appropriate use of such loans. In response to the revised lending terms, the government has cut the Public Works Loan Board lending rate to gilts plus 100 basis points for standard rates and gilts plus 80 basis points for those authorities able to make use of the certainty rate. Table 4 shows that the forecast capital expenditure for this financial year is 43.7 million. This 36.4 million is planned to be for financially immediate through the application of capital or revenue resources, e.g. capital receipts or capital grants. The remaining 7.3 million will increase the council's overall borrowing need. Table 5 shows the consequential impact of the capital programme on the council's capital financing requirement. Forecast closing capital financing requirement for this financial year is 329 million, which is the cumulative total of the 2021 unfinanced capital expenditure and prior years unfinanced capital. This is lower than the original estimate due to the halt in planned commercial property acquisitions. Table 6 shows that the council has maintained an under-borrowed position. This means the capital borrowing need has not been fully funded with loan debts, as cash supporting the council's reserves, balances and cash flow have been used as a temporary measure. The prudent indicators in relation to the capital financial requirement, the authorised limit and the operational borrowing boundaries have been complied with in this financial year. As part of this report, Council is asked to provide an increase in the approved counterpart limit with an additional money market fund from 5 million to 10 million, the remaining within the existing 25 million maximum for that type of financial instrument. This is to provide additional flexibility in holding short-term cash. I'd ask members to approve this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Anyone from the Treasury team who have joined us like to make any remarks? Annabelle, any of you or your colleagues?
I wouldn't mind making a couple if you don't mind, Nida. I just want to re-emphasise why we're sort of asking for the limits to be changed. On table 1, you can actually see the value of the investments that we're still looking after for the council. It's really positive that we've managed to maintain the balances at that level, but it has left us with this challenge as to where to place it in a safe place. And the thing that's been really hard for us and the Treasury team is actually, if we now just place the money with the government overnight, we actually have to pay them. It's a negative interest rate. So it's really important for us to try and open up doors that are still secure, that will enable us to place the money and get, even though it's a small, with a base rate of 0.1%, we're not going to get much of return on our investments, and the priority is keeping it safe. But I just wanted to highlight that really, that is the real crux behind why we're having to ask for changing the limits. It's really, really difficult for the team now to place money. The local authority market, as much as we managed to keep 5 million with other local authorities at the 30th of September, again, they're just not in the market at the rate, the levels that we want to place the money at, to ensure that we've got the flexibility and the cash available to us. So if we had lots more money, as in 10 million in a go, we probably could place more with local authorities, but we're just not in that market. So we're really having to look at different ways we can place the money, but it's all about security. I'm really proud of the team. They've worked really hard. We've got Caroline, who's taken it on with us this year and really learned a lot about Treasury and kept it very safe as well. So again, it's another sort of good news story about how the team has stepped up, taken on new activities and learned, but also kept our money very, very safe and secure. So it's a good news report, but obviously with a slight request to help us with those changes in the limits, please.
Thank you, Annabelle. Okay, Cabinet colleagues, any points to be made? I'm sure we'd want to add our thanks to the work of the team in a sort of a turbulent period of interest rates and negative interest rates. I'll start with James. James, you got any questions on this?
Well, just not a question, thank you, Chair, just a point, and that is that it doesn't surprise anyone, I don't think, that there's been a change to the rules around PWLB eligibility, simply because I think there are some councils, and I hasten to say not this council, that have used it as a tap that can be turned on at will to make purchases, and so I think that was about time. But I've no doubt that our Treasury team will find ways around funding our projects using other means. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Sandra.
Yes, please. I've got a question that kind of follows up from a scrutiny meeting that discussed the treasury management strategy. And they made a very important recommendation. They asked Cabinet to further understand where money market funds are invested and if this investment is ethical. I appreciate that security is paramount, but I think we also need to put our money where our mouth is, quite literally, and make sure that this investment is ethical. So I was just wondering whether the recommendation has been actioned, and if you could give me some more information on these investments, please.
Okay, that's a big question area. Have we got a technical answer to that, Annabelle?
I can't give you an answer to that tonight, I'm afraid. We'll come back to you on that. I know we did some homework previously, and I apologise, I just haven't got it to hand. So we'll have another look at that and share it with you. I do apologise for not having it to hand.
Okay, we'll note that as an action, Sandra. Is that okay? Good. Right. Any further points before we go to the recommendations? On this, I mean, I would just say, of course, that councils have been having to look at this option of investment into yield commercial assets, because the revenue support grant structure has been significantly diminished, and a government which kind of forgets that it was very keen on saying to councils, you need to generate more of your own income, and here are some financial instruments by which you can do it, and then throw their hands up in horror when it suits them. So I think there's what we might describe as rank hypocrisy as part of that. Anyway, let's go to the recommendations on page 71. Recommendation 1 and 2. All those in favour? Good, thank you. Right. Let's move on then, please, to page 89, and that's the corporate performance. And for the first time in a while, actually, the risk report. I'll say more about that in a moment. Quarter 2. Now, this is familiar to everybody in the room. We monitor our corporate performance on a quarterly basis, and the report runs through the familiar introduction about our corporate priorities, built around 3 areas. It also gives us in paragraph 5 and 6, paragraph 5 provides colleagues with the opportunity to look at the granular data, but paragraph 6 is a reminder to us that the impacts of COVID have clearly affected performance information, though having looked at the achievements of the COVID recovery plan update, I think our performance is justifiably exceptional in the circumstances. So you have a series of, you have a snapshot of where things currently are. It's interesting to note, for example, a decrease in sickness absence. Even in the most stressful of times, people have really sort of stepped up to the plate to help keep things going. Customer performance satisfaction rates are positive, high. I mean, in some areas, one would want them to be higher, but again, the impact, I think, of COVID has obviously sort of blunted some of that data. But nevertheless, it's a significant achievement in the circumstances. The importance of trying to support the additional client income through debt and money advice. I mean, that's been under significant pressure because advisors have been, as the report says in page 93, firefighting. I mean, as Councillor Davis would no doubt tell us, a large number of people have now interacted with the benefits system for the first time in their working lives and found it wanting in terms of what they could have expected by way of support from things like universal credit. There may be more comments on that when I finish making these introductory remarks. Delighted by the Green Flag Awards for 2 parks, for parks and open spaces, and perhaps a little harsh to have it rated as red that we didn't get a 3rd one, but we were close. So there's a good story to tell. The importance, I think, of monitoring this is helpful to us to give a sense check of how things are going during this difficult period, and obviously it's a guide to help us deploy resources where we need to. The second part of this report is the coupling with the corporate risk register. It used to come to Cabinet, then it didn't, but I do think the work that's being done by the leadership team around looking at the risk register and how to populate that and the criteria by which to do that, I think has been a very important piece of work. So I would draw people's attention to the schedules in Appendix 1, covering the council's financial position. So each of these strands give a description, an impact, and a mitigation, and then some populating that with some further data to round out the particular element of the risk register. So it goes on to talk about the medium and longer term, which has been referred to both by Councillor Kendrick and by Annabelle. Commercialisation, which I know has been an issue of some discussion, which is fair enough. But there is, a proportionate response to those issues, and we have a report later on today which tells us a good news story. Health and safety in the workplace, preparing, being part of the second wave of COVID, moving forward on that. So we've touched on that in the earlier report, and of course the impact of Brexit. Now, just in case Brexit at the end of the year is not the land of milk and honey the Prime Minister promised us in 2016. There is, we have to take an account of the pessimistic side of this. I know the Prime Minister is a man of unbounded optimism, so I'm sure he'll come in and deliver for us on December the 31st. But we do have to take a precautionary approach to the impact of Brexit. And I think the comment section of that, currently lots of unknowns, and it is lots of unknowns shared by many businesses up and down the country at the moment. But we hope for their sake and for ours there is clarity and seamlessness as we go forward into 2021. And it also picks up with 7 critical business continuity, emergency planning. That's populated in detail. But one of the things that has preoccupied us over the period, sustained increase in homelessness and temporary accommodation, and the significant work we've been able to do to find permanent solutions rather than simply temporary solutions to that problem. And cybersecurity, of course, particularly important. And then the joint venture contracts, a number of colleagues are involved in the progress of that, with the first insourcing to take place from April next year. So the final one being statutory and legislative responsibilities. Now, frankly, for local government, I make this a general point, for local government, if there is not sufficient funding, what government would want us to be able to do, that becomes harder and harder, and they need to think long and hard about all of that. So I welcome the addition of the risk register to the performance. I think it's a very informative series of points for us to look at as elected members and as a public document. So with those slightly longer introductory remarks than I've intended, I'll ask any Cabinet colleagues if they've got any questions or observations. Karen.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to apologise for my internet continuing to go down, but I think I'm back in on a new network now. I just wanted to flag the kind of thread that's been running through these Cabinet reports around financial insecurity and economic uncertainty. And with the second wave of COVID and with potentially a no-deal Brexit, I think it is something that we are going to, I think it's going to be one of our main problems going forward. And I know we have spoken about it earlier, but it just seems to be this is a continual threat at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Any other Cabinet colleagues? Gail?
Thank you, Alan. I'd just like to say I think the risk register being included in these papers is really incredibly helpful. And I want to refer to risk 8, which is the sustained increase in homelessness and temporary accommodation, because I think the mitigation measures within that are worth highlighting. The fact that we do employ a specialist tenancy relations advisor to deal with private rented sector tenants threatened by homelessness. The fact that this council is a gold standard authority, that means it's one of the best in the country. And so that can't be underestimated. And also that we employ a specialist domestic abuse housing advisor. I mean, we really are at the forefront of doing such really, really good work. But then we go on to the risk control action, and we're talking about the team, and we need to monitor it because they could need additional resource, because they are under such pressure. The pressure will not go away. It's going to get worse. So I think we need to recognise and certainly monitor that to see if any additional support will be needed. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Gail. Any further comments from Cabinet colleagues? No. Sandra.
Yes, please. First of all, Ellen, obviously, I would agree that there's some discussion around commercialization, and I think, I would have liked to add quite a few points to the descriptions and triggers when it comes to the risk register around the kind of the changing economy that, in our opinion, obviously could have been foreseen and is now accelerated through COVID. So I'm sure we will continue to discuss this. But my question is in relation to the corporate performance measure of the amount of additional income that clients have gained through council provided debt and money advice. And I appreciate that there are a number of reasons why this is in red. So that's, I appreciate that has been explained. But I think we can unfortunately, as Karen has pointed to, expect that more people will need that kind of advice going forward as the impacts of the pandemic become more visible. So could you please explain what is being done to ensure that the council has sufficient capacity to give this advice, and that we ensure that vacancies are being filled quickly so we have the capacity when it's needed?
Okay. Karen, your portfolio holder area.
Yeah, I can pick up on this. Thanks, Sandra. I actually had a meeting with the consortium last week, and this was one of the things that came up. And one of the issues was at the beginning of COVID, so quite early on, the people they were dealing with were used to seeing face-to-face advisors, and there was quite a lot of resistance with people making phone calls or going online to get advice. So that is one of the main issues, but that is turning around now as people have kind of had it explained to them that this is the only way we can help you at the moment. We can't have those face-to-face advice surgeries. So that was one of the main issues, but they said that is changing now, and people are much more willing to pick up the phone or work online.
Thank you very much, Karen. Adam, I meant to bring you in earlier. Would you like to make any general comments or pick out any particular points before I bring in James?
No, but I'll just pick up and just following on from Karen's point. I think the one of the key things in terms of ensuring that people have access to the crisis advice when they have financial crisis is minimising the number of people who get there. So there's more and more work being done across the council and across teams to ensure that our approach to income collection has an element of prevention in it, such that rather than wait until people get into crisis and then need them to access advice, ensure that our whole approach to income collection minimises that. So and that's something that was in train anyway, but is accelerating with some of the work that's been undertaken through the community hub with COVID. There's been a lot of learning in this period, which we can hold on to. Thanks,
Adam. Stephen?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in relation to risk 7 about kind of emergency planning resilience, because I think what's been highlighted quite right is we're already in a period of incredible uncertainty, and we're about to kind of go into a further period of uncertainty, no matter what happens over the next few weeks with Brexit. And what that has meant is that I've been really focused on trying to increase our emergency resilience since I've arrived. A couple of things that we have done, so written into the job descriptions of all of the new senior leadership team, so directors, myself, heads of service, that they will form part of the emergency response team. And a couple of weeks ago, I put out a request through my weekly message to all staff for colleagues to come forward to be part of our emergency response. Various key roles there around managing rest centres, and I was really pleased to see 22 colleagues come forward to put themselves forward, which for me shows two things. I think it shows an engaged workforce, and it shows a workforce which is really kind of understanding of the importance of all of this. So I think some really good progress made there.
Thank you, Stephen. Very helpful. James, you've been patient.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just make a point that I, agreeing with others, that the inclusion of the risk register is incredibly helpful. And a particular area of my interest is cybersecurity and GDPR compliance. So I'm very pleased to see that particular table there and the work that's being undertaken, and that the Council is taking that so seriously. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any further comments on that? Okay, can we go to the recommendations, which are on page 89? Note the progress of the key performance indicators and the register, suggest future actions and or reports to address any areas of concern. So we've had some discussion about that. So if we can indicate if we support both those recommendations. Okay, that's passed unanimously. Let's move on to item 9, which is Scrutiny Committee recommendations, page 113. Councillor Kendrick, you to introduce, and then on to Councillor Wright.
Yes, this is obviously the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee. So can I ask Councillor Wright, as who's chair of that committee, just to specify that? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Kendrick, and thank you, Chair. The report before you today covers 2 Scrutiny Committee meetings. I'll deal with the most recent one first, which is November, where we looked at, well, the topic for the meeting was maximising opportunities to achieve zero rough sleeping following COVID-19. And we were greatly assisted by 2 experts who joined us to answer questions. Matt Downey, who's currently works at Crisis, and Caroline Allywell, who has previously worked at Citizens Advice Service and Shelter. So both of them are experts in their field. I think there were a couple of takeaways before I move on to our recommendations. The first of which was both of them took to Twitter after the meeting to congratulate the work of the council in terms of its homelessness strategy and what is being done in Norwich to prevent homelessness. So I think that needs to be said and needs to be publicly commented on. And they also congratulated the committee for sort of asking the right questions. So the recommendations that I present to you today on page 114 are in that context, and to a certain extent are around some of the council's procedures and communication strategies, and work with members about how we can support those people in our communities who are at risk of a Section 21 eviction, or perhaps are already homeless. So those are the recommendations on homelessness for your consideration. And on the next page, this was the sort of topic that it felt like Groundhog Day at one point, because we had the LEP with us for the September meeting. Then they put a written submission into October, but we didn't have time to consider those that written submission. So in November, we finally were able to consider the written recommendations from members of the committee around the LEP. And I suppose there's two broad themes there, one of which is around governance of the LEP itself, and the other relates to the LEP and some of its policies and the environmental impact of those policies. So I won't go through them in detail, but again, I present those for consideration, and again would like to thank those people from the LEP who came along and were able to answer in such full detail the questions from committee members there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Well, this, I suppose, is the Christmas edition with a sort of a bumper crop of recommendations for our delectation. I mean, I think I must express some concern, and I'll start with the LEP section, which I attended that scrutiny committee, as you will recall, to answer questions. And just sort of running down the list, I can see things that I have, answered in a recent question to council. I have had email exchanges with Councillor Osborne, who I think is particularly energised by the subject of the LEP, and I would question whether, I mean, there are recommendations in a technical sense, but a lot of them are questions. And my view about scrutiny's role as a personal role is, and it does this on many occasions in a very, very helpful way, is to come up with some recommendations that arise out of a piece of deep dive work into an area of council activity or policy to help inform our policies going forward. And that, I think, is evident in some of the recommendations relating to homelessness. But it seems to be the sort of generation of a lot of questions at a very iterative and detailed level that will take a lot of time to look at, and are not really recommendations. And I'm not quite sure where the end result of this goes, particularly in the context of the opportunity to have questioned the LEP directly. Now, I'm a member of the LEP board, and I'm one of a large number of people working across two council areas in Norfolk and Suffolk. And we work together to get strategies in place for climate change, around the economy, around jobs, and so on. And all of those things we do to our best endeavours. The LEP is what it is. I know people are not happy with the governance structure, but that's the way it's been designed. And so we need to make the best of it. And I think we do as a council, and I represent the views, as I've said before, of this council at those meetings. But I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time going through questions that have already been asked several times, because I don't really think this is a recommendation. This is just what I'm getting in my inbox from the same councillors who are putting stuff in here. So actually I will just note those personally, and frankly leave it at that, but mindful of the fact that these are areas that we are working in very actively, and I have personally taken the initiative to make sure there is union representation moving forward on the LEP and engaged with that strategy. And I've made that assurance on, I think, at least 3 occasions. So I don't know whether, Gail, you wanted to come in on some of the housing issues, and Kevin as well.
Thank you. I wasn't at the meeting because I was understanding it was mainly around rough sleeping. So Kevin volunteered to do it and I didn't attend the meeting. So perhaps it would have been helpful if I'd been there. But I did, there are a lot of questions. I'm not sure how readily some of the information would be without causing a considerable amount of work, like provide a demographic of those who have received such communications to the scrutiny committee members. I don't know, it might be that they're a press of a button, but I go back to the risk register and the fact that, you know, this department is dealing with 900 initial approaches in a quarter. So that they are under pressure. So I think I have some information that I'm sure that Louise and I can pull together for you. I can't commit that we will be pulling together information on every point, but we can certainly have a look at it. But I'd just like to make the point that I can give you the very clear news that you've requested some training. That is on the 12th of January 2021. So that will be via Zoom at 6 p.m. and it will provide members with background to the reasons why people are on the street, how they can help them, and an opportunity to speak to staff on the front line of our specialist complex needs service pathways. And there'll be case studies and a question and answer. So I think that will be a really useful session for members to attend. So that's a very easy one. But then, you know, when I was looking at the minutes, and it said a member commented that the council needed to ensure that there was no perception of threat in the council's communications around this topic. We're talking about intentional homelessness, I believe, at the time. But then it's sort of translated to reduce the perception of threat. Well, I'm not so sure that we threaten people. We don't threaten people, but you know, when people present us, you know, with the possibility of homelessness, we actually have to be honest with them and make sure they realise what the likely outcomes are. And this council has always done an enormous amount of preventative work. And we got over 80% of all clients who present us facing homelessness are prevented in becoming so. So that's a really good achievement. So you know, you're asking us to lobby central government. Well, we always seem to be lobbying central government, but what we do really well is creative bids. And, you know, and we have the standing and we have the reputation and we are drawing money in time and time again for our services. So if I can be left with this with Louise, we'll pull together some of the very quick answers. But if it's the service has got to come first, it's got to come before answering questions. So, you know, if you could leave that with me, we'll certainly look at that in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, do you want to come in? Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. Just very quickly, I think I was a little bit surprised at some of these resolutions. I won't go into any detail, but the wording suggests that, you know, well, work with county and advice agencies to map where to refer people who need early intervention. Well, there's a good idea, and you know, lobby central government. Well, there's a good idea, and when I present you item 12 of this meeting, you will see some examples of how our officers do exactly that. And I was a little bit, well, in a way upset on the part of our officers for all the work that they do. And this seemed to not realise, even though this has been the subject to, among other things, a briefing, a shadow briefing, so that the representatives of the opposition parties were able to look at, in particular, in this case, homelessness and rough sleeping, how we do rough sleeping. So all this information has been there And yet here we have this thing, these kind of recommendations, and I think it's a sadness in that sense. We do a lot already, and you'll see some really good examples later on in this meeting.
Okay. Any other cabinet members before I bring in James and Sandra? No. Sandra, do you want to go first, and then I'll bring in James to sort of wrap up from his perspective as chair of scrutiny.
Yeah, so I've got to say I'm a little bit baffled by this whole discussion. I think I'd just like to make a couple of comments or observations. I think what this shows is that scrutiny used to function very differently. It used to be, when I was a member of scrutiny, when I was first a councillor, we used to tour the services, talk to officers. We discussed homelessness before. We used to go to St. Martin's to talk to them. I mean, it used to be really an in-depth exploration of what the council is already doing and what they could do better. And my personal perception is that scrutiny has been further and further sidelined. You know, we can make of my perception what you want, but I think it just shows that the fact that questions rather than recommendations come out of scrutiny just shows that in-depth work, there is no space for that anymore. My second observation is that scrutiny is not made up of opposition parties only. Members of the administration group are very welcome to explain anything that their party and have knowledge of, and they should as much as we do. So it's not an opposition party function. It is a function that is cross-party, that is aimed at improving the council. And my third observation is that the number and enthusiasm when it comes to the LEP just shows that we recognise what an important body it is. And I'd like to maybe suggest to Councillor Waters that we have a chat about how we can take this forward without it being, you know, draining on your or officers' resources. And I think there is maybe something for us to identify how we can kind of be better informed about the work. Maybe there are channels through a secretary that we're not aware of, and maybe have face-to-face or Zoom or whatever discussions about. So it's not all in your inbox. I understand that, you know, that is not the most efficient way. But I'd also like to just I'd just like to also comment that I don't think it is appropriate to single out single councillors' enthusiasm and criticise it here. I don't think that is an appropriate thing to do.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was not the intention in the case of Councillor Osborne, who I know has been you know, articulate and interested on these things. James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think sort of a couple of takeaways from that. Firstly, on the LEP, chatting with some members after the meeting in September of the LEP, I think there was a bit of a conclusion that the sort of stock of the LEP had gone up in their sort of in their perception because of the frank nature of the answers that were being given to the committee. So I think, you know, despite perhaps how the recommendations have ended up looking, it was a very positive piece of work. I mean, that Councillor Bergline has already mentioned the sort of the cross-party nature of the scrutiny committee. I mean, again, it is worthwhile pointing out there is an inbuilt majority in the scrutiny committee that represents the administration party, and these recommendations do not come through to cabinet unless those administration councillors have signed off on them. So Councillor Maguire talks about sadness. You know, maybe it just demonstrates the independent nature of the scrutiny committee is working as it should do, and I suppose we can be thankful for that. Thank you. Okay,
so that's been a frank discussion. I suppose in concluding, is that scrutiny committee is entitled in governance terms to send us any recommendations it wishes to bring forward. But I suppose what I would say is that it would probably be sensible or helpful to get a sense check of whether the work that is covered perhaps by some recommendations or some questions is already being done. And points I made certainly about some of the LEP stuff is, you know, a repetition. How long do you continue to raise the same issues that have been addressed. Now, they may not, the point is they may not be addressed to one's satisfaction, but there is a kind of a finite part to any exercise around this, if not to sort of clutter up the work of scrutiny committee and its opportunities to look at other areas that's on its work programme, or in terms of the work that we do as a cabinet. So best endeavours to pick up some of the issues, but I do feel that if those issues that have been raised are already part of the programme of work that's being carried out, that really needs to be acknowledged as well going forward. So we note the recommendations. We will respond to some of them that are salient and need addressing, but others need to take account also, and I think scrutiny would want to do this, of the immense amount of work that's having to be done during this particularly challenging period. And so a recognition of the time pressures that there are also needs to be factored into the recommendations that scrutiny sends up to us. Okay, so we will note those recommendations on page 113. Can we agree to do that? Thank you. And let's move on then to item 10. Consultation response to the draft local transport plan. Councillor Stonnard.
I'll just mute.
Yep, we can hear you.
Brilliant, great, okay, good. So this is the council's proposed response to the local transport plan consultation by the county council, who you will be aware have for the last year taken back control of highways matters covering the city with the abolition of the former Norwich Highways Agency Committee. It covers the period 2020 to 2036. It's very strategic. It sets out high level objectives and principles and clearly further detail that sits or would sit beneath these strategic high level objectives would need to be further worked on and developed. But it sets out a direction of travel which builds on the existing success of our highways policies under NHAC, working together with the county council. It also responds to the challenge of climate change, air pollution, and the need to make our city more livable, and that's to improve health and the quality of life. It also, of course, links with the city's 2020 vision, the COVID recovery plan, and the Norwich City Centre public spaces plan, which colleagues will be all aware of. It's not designed to provide detailed transport policy. It is strategic and high level for a considerable period for 16 years. Our view, and we say this in our responses at the county consultation document, is, by the way, can you hear me okay? Because I've got papers over the, yeah, I'm not sure where the microphone is on my computer. So, our view is that the county consultation document is unambitious and uninspiring and fails to address the significant challenges facing the city. We think there's a general lack of ambition or recognition that the world must change radically by 2036. And when you're talking about that sort of strategic planning period and looking that far ahead, that's what is to be expected. The sort of radical transformational change that can only be achieved over that sort of period. And actually what we're saying is consistent with the government's objectives in the gear change document, and the document, the response mentions this, where when that was published earlier this year, it stated that England, the plan was for England to be a great walking and cycling nation, with half of all journeys in towns and cities being cycled or walked by 2030. That is a massive ambition, and that's something that the government has set as an objective. So this isn't something that we're doing alone, or where we're out of kilter or ahead of the national direction. This is something where we're in effect pushing in an open door. We think that we need to press the reset button and stop assuming that traffic growth is going to happen and then planning for it. And the document says we need to design the future and stop the self-fulfilling prophecy and plan for that. And the pandemic has shown how quickly the way we work can change, how habits can change. And of course, some of that will be long lasting. For example, the advent of home working. We know that clearly when we get to something like normal again, then there will be more face-to-face working, but also we've learned during the pandemic that home working and remote working can be extremely effective and can indeed reduce the need to travel. The document also makes it clear that it's also about social justice. It says the availability of transport services is a determinant of life chances. And that's about things like getting to education, getting to employment, and so on. And the policy needs to recognise that, reduce inequalities and promote fairness. And as we say in the document, we need to ensure that there is affordable access to employment and education. People can travel around affordably without resort to the car. In particular, the internal combustion engine car. But as we say, we talk about the need to support, and moving on more specifically to support the development of electric vehicles, but we need to recognise that they themselves, much of the electricity they use is generated by fossil fuels. That's got to be addressed. And the manufacture of them creates pollution and uses energy. And of course, they consume the same amount of road space as a conventional vehicle. And they can still kill and maim. And in fact, the fact that they're silent can make them even more dangerous. So we need to have those caveats. But that said, they do represent an improvement, a massive improvement, and we must provide the necessary infrastructure. And one of the reasons that is important, of course, moving to electric cars, is that we know that transport and other forms of electric vehicle, we do know that transport accounts for a third of CO2 emissions. So that is something we have to take seriously. Also, we're proposing looking at expanding the 20-mile-an-hour limit, which we've already implemented very successfully in the city centre and in certain parts of the city. We know it's not just about the environment, it's also about road safety. And we know that between 2000 and 2010, speed management contributed to a reduction of 59% in road collisions in this county, and a reduction in the killed and seriously injured rate from not the numbers, not the rate, from 862 to 352. That's significant. The proposal is for 20 miles an hour to be the default speed in Norwich. That would make roads much safer for all. That's motorists, cyclists and pedestrians. But of course, we would be selective in terms of which roads were included. But residential areas would certainly be by default 20-mile-an-hour zones. We're also considering a workplace parking levy to discourage land being used for parking. It can also release land for development in the city. And it's around encouraging employers to incentivise employees to walk, cycle or use public transport. Some of the media coverage of this last week tended to assume that this is a levy that the employees would be paying, and it's an employer levy. That's important. We're proposing this to be applied across the urban area. And when we've just discussed this before, the proposals have always been, or have been in the past, just for the city council boundary area, which of course would have serious repercussions in terms of potentially encouraging businesses to move out to the outskirts of the city. It needs to be done on a much wider area, which is why we're proposing it in this way across the whole urban area. And I've noticed that Nottingham have already done it. They've said it's been very successful, and it's been looked at in London as well. Also proposed is raising long stay parking charges in our public car parks. Really, this is about an incentivization for people to use park and ride, and maintain overall revenues by offsetting the fewer users with a higher individual amount to be paid. And this links in with the parking levy, because the parking levy, what we would be looking to do with the income from the parking levy would be to invest in infrastructure like park and ride, to improve park and ride, because to date, we all know that it's quite limited, and it does need to be significantly improved. It was going to make an even bigger contribution to removing traffic from the city centre. We're also, what overall we're seeking to do really is to reallocate road space from cars to walking, cycling and public transport, and to make it safer, quicker and more reliable, in particular to use public transport. And this is it builds on policies that we've been implementing for some time, but I hope you'll appreciate from what I've been saying that this is a major change. This is going up several gears. As I say, we're looking at a 16-year period. You can do that over that period of time. And then it's also coherent in the sense that it fits in with all our other policies that we have for roughly that strategic period. So I would commend this to you. I hope you'll feel that this is an ambitious response to the consultation on the part of the City Council, and it'll start a good, healthy debate with the county around transport policy going forward. So thank you very much. And as I say, I'll commend this to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Ben, any points that you would want to add at this point?
No, there's nothing I would add. It's obviously a very detailed document, and I think Mike has summarised many of the key points very well.
Okay, thanks very much, Ben. Any Cabinet colleagues, any questions, observations? It's been discussed at LSEP, of course. Sandra, any points from you?
Yes, please. First of all, I'd like to thank Ben Webster and Graham Nelson for the response they've drafted. This document was clearly written by someone with expertise in sustainable transport planning and issues around equality of transport that tend to be overlooked very often when we talk about this. I would actually go as far as saying it was a joy to read, and it obviously picks up on a number of discussions and motion puts by ourselves and also the Liberal Democrats around schools and 20 miles per hour and things like that. So I think it's a great document. I especially like the sentiment of the overall critique, the notion that policy should be informed by determining the future we want, and the request to state carbon budgets and then present stronger policies which contain these carbon budgets. And I have to say that this is in a nutshell our critique of the City Council's environmental strategy. So it gives me hope that the thinking is evolving, and we will, and these kind of principles will also be applied to the City Council's own strategies. My question refers to the apparent disconnect of the transport strategy for Norwich and the need to urgently develop the Transport for Norwich strategy, which is clearly highlighted in the response. I was just wondering if there is any indication when we can expect this strategy to come forward, and whether there's any time requirement for the County Council to produce this.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
We meet quite regularly with the County Council to discuss their programme and preparing the Transport for Norwich strategy, and it's been a bit sticky of late, but we've got a timetable out of them that now envisages them to start really in earnest next year, at the start of next year, with a view to having at least a draft strategy in place by September. Is the timing they're talking about. So they're going to effectively do it in 2 stages, with the first stages focused actually more on a strategy, because the previous approach was very much based on a modeling approach where they needed a load of data to inform what they were doing. And obviously at the current level, it's quite difficult to go out and assess where road movements are and traffic patterns and vehicle movements, because they're clearly quite seriously affected by the pandemic. So they're talking about changing their approach to that and doing it in 2 stages, effectively dealing with the high level strategy issue first. And that was one of the reasons why we drafted this response in the way we did to the local transport plan, because it was an attempt to get ahead of the game and set out some sort of measures and the scope of the ambition that we would look at them to build into that Transport for Norwich strategy that, say, we hope is going to be a significant area of work for them in the coming year.
Okay, thank you, Graham. James?
Yes, and thank you, Chair. I'd like to also begin by thanking Ben and Graham for this excellent document. I've got a couple of points that I think have some sort of questions in them as well. Firstly, under section 2.0 policy principles, that's something that we could very much support, that whole section, especially section 2.2 about putting well-being and fairness at the centre of transport policy. I guess the question I have is, could we have mentioned that adopting 20-mile-an-hour limits on all of the city's roads do just that in terms of well-being and fairness, by ensuring that safer road space for safer cycling, so a greater modal shift leading to better health and well-being, and it also being an affordable option. And this seems to me to be one of the most sort of effective tools to ensuring fairness when coupled with more cycle lanes, etc. So I'll just go on to the next one. So I'm scrolling down my notes because it's quite a large document. Under section 3.4, there's a reference. It talks about sort of gradual reduction in space available for fossil fuel vehicles, but talks about the council's powers to enforce unauthorised car parks. I gather there are some of those at the moment anyway, unauthorised car parks, and just wonder if these are powers that we could be using at the moment. And finally, under section 3.9, freeing the city centre and the neighbourhoods from polluting vehicles, it talks about heavier flows confined to the edges of a neighbourhood. It seems to us that all streets should have the benefit of low traffic, and people who live in areas deserve clean air and free from noise, etc. So I wonder if we can be looking at extending that to all areas, and try and remove those heavier flows of traffic from the edges of the neighbourhood as well as from the centre of it. Thank you.
Okay. That may not be possible to answer all of those questions immediately, but Ben, did you want to come in?
Yes. So I think that there's potentially scope for us to alter the wording a little to emphasise the role that lower traffic speeds can play in terms of promoting fairness and accessibility to more affordable forms of transport. So I can certainly look at that in reference to paragraph 2.1. The council does, of course, have enforcement powers through the planning legislation to take action against car parks that haven't got planning permission, and that's something we do look at doing. We have to be very selective in how we use our enforcement resources because they're limited, but the document is obviously a statement of intent and a recognition that where unauthorized car parks are operating, then that undermines our transport strategy, and we don't want to see that happen. And then the final point is quite tricky, actually. This is a reference to common practice in the Netherlands, which the government has picked up and is advocating through the gear change document that Mike referred to. And I suppose, if you identify a residential neighbourhood within which you say people shouldn't be able to just drive easily through it, in order to prioritise people cycling and walking in that area, you know, it does inevitably mean that on the edge of that area that you've designated, there is some displacement of traffic. So you know, you might have a journey that is currently made by somebody who doesn't have an access requirement in that neighbourhood, but they're able to drive through it. If you're forcing them to go around the edge, then there'll be to a certain extent, there'll be a reconsideration of whether that journey needs to be made at all if it's less convenient. But when those journeys continue to be made, then, you know, those streets which surround the neighbourhood would probably experience some additional traffic, and then it becomes a case of how you mitigate that. So the slower traffic speeds, the fact that, you know, you don't necessarily have to provide more space to accommodate that an additional level of traffic if there's already excess space on those sections of highway, and you know, other ways of dealing with pollution such as tree planting. So, you know, that careful thinking about how to mitigate any displacement of traffic is an important aspect of that approach. But it can be quite fraught and controversial, you know, if you do try to do this, and you know, it does involve some careful public consultation to try and build a consensus.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much for that.
Thank you for that considered answer. Thank you, James, for asking it. Okay. So what this paper reflects is it reflects the political priorities of the Labour administration. So Sandra and James have been generous and appropriately generous to both Ben and Graham for their work on this. I would like to thank Councillor Stonnard and Councillor Maguire for the work that they have done to shape this strategy, which is before us today and has received a strong support, strong cross-party support. Okay, can we go to the recommendations? And it's to approve the City Council's response, and obviously we'll see how that story plays out. Hands up, please, for Alex.
Councillor Kendrick.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's all right. Well done. Round them all up. Okay, that's passed. Let's go on to item 11. Conscious of the time, we've been working away for the last 2 hours in a very positive way. So item 11, which is on page 143, update on the business activities of Norwich Regeneration Limited. That's over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm going to just introduce the report briefly, and then I'm going to hand over to Dave Shaw, who's going to talk about this in a little more detail. And the first thing I want to say is what this report sets out is a remarkable turnaround in the performance of our housing company. Of course, these things don't happen by accident, they happen by design, and an awful lot of very hard work has gone into this. As you'll see, and has been Stephen alluded to it earlier on, and Dave will talk about it a bit more in a moment. At the moment, our houses are selling like hotcakes, and they're turning a healthy profit. The position that we're in now is we're operating at a profit, and that means that we are ahead of the projections in terms of the loan and loan repayments that we were making just a short while ago. And indeed, we're in a position to start thinking about repaying the City Council as things go ahead. That's really, really good news. Over the last year or so, 18 months, we've taken very clear action to improve the governance of the company, which is now really tight, and also to further strengthen the board with what we now have a very strong set of relevant skills and experience. And there's every reason to feel optimistic about the fortunes of the company going forward. And this has been achieved, and we've mentioned COVID and the pandemic previously, in very, very difficult circumstances over the last year. And Dave will talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, in a moment. But, you know, we did have to stop work for a while, and we did have to negotiate that with our contractors, and that did have an impact, because clearly the longer it takes for properties to sell and for money to come in, then the longer and more drawn out the loan situation is. Now, I know Paul made a comment earlier on about the position of the opposition on some of these things, and I'm aware that the opposition don't like us saying these things, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's quite clear that when times are a bit more difficult a little while ago, and we were confident that we could further improve the company's performance and indeed trade our way out of our difficulties, at that point the opposition would have been in favour of dissolving the company, meaning the council would have had to have accepted a large debt, and also none of the houses that we have built during a housing crisis, which are much needed, would have been built. And it's quite clear that at every turn of this, the opposition have sought to frustrate our objectives of having a functioning, effective housing company which can produce income for the council, as well as providing much needed homes in our city. And I think the fact that we're now trading at a profit, and we're now looking at repayment, and we're now ahead of our business plan in that regard, suggests very strongly that we were right to proceed as we did. So, as I say, feeling optimistic. There are tough times ahead. There are challenging times ahead. We don't know what the post-COVID economy is going to look like. We don't know about the impact of Brexit either, whether or not we get a deal. There are lots of uncertainties out there, but certainly at the moment, we're in a very healthy position to go forward and meet those challenges. And I'll pass you over now to Dave Shaw, Managing Director, who will talk in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Over to you, Dave.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you all this evening and update Cabinet on the mid-year trading position of NRL. It also gives me an opportunity to thank colleagues across the council for continued support and assisting me in directing this company, whilst addressing what Mike has rightly described as still a financial challenging position for the company, whilst dealing with the impacts of COVID-19. So as a way of an introduction, if I may just recap on events at the start of this financial year. In March 2020, we took to Cabinet our NRL business plan for financial year 2021, which supported the completion of Rain Park and highlighted within that business plan the scale of future development that would be required for the company to make annual profit. But as you've probably been discussing all evening, by the 26th of March, the world changed, and for us, as a company, we had to quickly understand the impacts of COVID-19 to that said business plan. April and May for me were very pivotal months in which to navigate and direct this company through these uncharted waters, and significantly in this period, NRL delivered recommendations to Cabinet and therefore subsequently full council on how to continue to deliver the developments at Rain Park whilst experiencing difficulties imposed to us by COVID-19. The conclusions of those recommendations was to continue to support NRL in the build out of Rain Park, with the aim ultimately to continue to recognise revenue through the open market sales of the units that we were building. Critically for me, the improvements to the overall governance of the company and ensuring a closer working relationship with council officers has clearly been hugely beneficial, and critical to these improvements are how NRL now operates to ensure constant monitoring and analysis of the open market sales, and open market sales specifically in Norwich, are impacting the company, whilst again we understand the impacts of COVID-19. All of which really do conclude that, as I've said on many occasions, I really do feel this company is in a far better consolidated and stabilised position, and we truly understand the overall performance of the company. If I may just go a little bit into my report and just talk through some progress from March 2020. Obviously, Mike's just mentioned that when national lockdown first was imposed across the country due to CV-19, of course, work stopped at Rain Park. We had to work extremely hard with the main contractor to negotiate our contracts, to assess, mitigate and control risks brought on by COVID-19. And this has really led to many changes, especially how we address and deliver our works on the development at Rain Park. Site processes, procedures, all now must be adhered to that far beyond any health and safety requirements I've known in the past, all of which, of course, trying to control the spread of COVID-19. So extremely important for us to do that. In my opinion, NRL, with professional support from all its external stakeholders, have ensured that the two contracts that we have currently got going on in the development of Rain Park have ensured that the spread of COVID-19 has been appropriately mitigated whilst we resumed the construction process from May 2020. To such an extent, obviously we sat here today and I'll be talking to you in a moment about sales. And although sales and then the marketing of new homes at Rain Park was delayed because of COVID-19, because of this intensive work with the main contractor to assess and mitigate those risks of COVID-19, we were able to successfully launch a marketing and sales campaign in the late July, start of August of 2020. If I now just go into some statistics about the sales strategy, we attempted to generate sales through 3 clear, distinct phases of sales. And I'm pleased to report this evening that from the 39 properties which have been released to date, all of a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, NRL has sold or exchanged 39 of those new homes into the marketplace. 72% of those new homes are first-time buyers. From the predicted 19 properties of the said 39 homes, we will be completing on them before Christmas. December 20 is when the cash inflows will come in to the company on those properties. That will basically mean that the company has got revenue coming in of £4.2 million for 17 of the properties, which will be lived in before Christmas, and then a further £500,000 on 2 properties where families moving in January. For the remaining properties, for which there are 19, we have sold those properties subject to contract, and this will generate for the company a further sales revenue that takes us to a total of 9.63 million. I really do believe that this is an extraordinary result in some very challenging times, and it really shows, as Mike alluded to, some clear decision making we made around our sales agent and choice of sales agent in ensuring that we placed our product at the right price and quality drives that we undertook through the contract negotiations with Garters. In addition to this news, NRL will be marketing a phase 4 on Boxing Day at Rain Park, for which the remaining 9 properties of section 3 and 4 will be marketed for sale. If we accomplish those sales through the Christmas period, that will take the company to a potential £11.8 million of revenue for the full sale of 48 new homes at Rain Park. Mike also alluded in his introduction about the key improvements to governance, and I wish to highlight that this evening that I also second that the appointment of the 2 non-executive directors have offered great support and expertise on housing development to this company. The key decision by the Chief Executive to appoint 2 participating observers from Norwich City Council to the board of NRL has been a huge benefit. We modified and approved our risk register, and we've ensured we have an appropriate working relationship between company and council. So I look forward to working in this new governance framework to ensure that the remaining months of this business plan and the planning for the company's new business plan, which I look forward to bringing into Cabinet in the new year, only bodes well for future success. On to the financial performance. I will keep this light, but happy to take any questions later. For me, the really pleasing highlight to note here is that in June, we obviously requested to help us through these difficult challenges and the impacts of COVID-19 to take a maximum loan facility of £21 million. But due to our impressive sales run rate, we are currently only borrowing from that said facility at £16.8 million at this current moment. And we're forecasting not to go beyond that due to the sales inflows I've just discussed. Finally, as I said, I do want to take the opportunity this evening to thank several colleagues who have supported me and this company in what has felt like a very tough operating period. So I extend my thanks to Stephen Evans for his support, and importantly, his appropriate challenge of me to give regular performance updates on expenditure on the contract of Rain Park and clear justifications of the company's requirements to draw down on that said loan facility. His commercial awareness and his understanding of the timing of the impacts on these two contracts due to COVID-19 has been appreciated and welcomed. I would also like to thank Graham Nelson for his support and dedication, specifically of his time to be a critical peer to me in the debate of strategic and operational matters at regular intervals throughout this trading period. Finally, I'd like to thank Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Stannard as my fellow board directors who have constantly supported me, they've constantly listened to me, and also given me the advice to continue to motivate me to continue to trade through these difficult times. So thank you for the opportunity to give you the update this evening.
Thank you very much, Dave. I think we can all agree a very good story. Cabinet colleagues, any observations? Gail?
Yeah, well, it is a really good news story, and you know it's really good that we can see that the market is moving, and that you know there is. Having been on the site, I've seen the quality of the houses, and it's really good. So Dave was just thanking everybody else, but I want to thank Dave for the amount of effort he's put into this. I know my colleagues have put a lot of effort in as well, but you know, he's driven this. He knows the market. He knows his business. So you know, I just like to say thank you for persevering with this, and we look forward to you building even more for us.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure we'll want to echo those thanks and put them in the minutes. Any other cabinet colleagues? I know Sandra's itching to come in. But we're going to try and we'll keep this brief now because it's 7:15. Okay, Sandra, off you go.
Yeah, see what you can do as a chair. So I think, you know, Councillor Sonnett, it's cabinet, but we still got to stick to the truth. We have at no point voted to dissolve this company or to stop building these houses. I think what the real story is here is that you've got an effective opposition who made you improve the governance of the company. And I think, you know, there is some credit to be taken here as well. I think I agree it's a good news story to see that those 39 houses are being sold. Unfortunately, it's not a good news story for everyone because we now see residents who have bought houses of phase one trying to resell them and experiencing that they were clearly overvalued with regards to the prices they've been offered and the quality they've been built to. However, my question to Dave Shaw is, and I also like to extend my thanks because he's really turned this company around, so well done. I'd like to understand exactly at what profit margin are these 39 houses predicted to be sold?
Thank you, Sandra. Dave, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, of course. Just to offer you some clarity there, when we talk about profit in this phase, obviously we must understand that the company still aims to control its overall company overhead. So we're talking about a gross profit within a project-based approach of each contract. So I just must make that clear. But if I give you an headline figure that we anticipated sales within our financial modelling as we started the business plan for 2021, at £11.4 million for revenue on the 48 homes I've described. We're currently sat at 11.8 of potential revenue coming into the company. So that shows you the step change in potential gross profit on this particular development.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mike. Michael wants to briefly respond, and then I'll bring in James.
Yeah, just for clarity, and I think we need to be absolutely clear about this, because the opposition clearly are trying to, I believe it's what actors call building up their part. If the opposition think that they have played any part whatsoever in influencing the hard work that we've done to improve and develop this company, then they are deluded. Absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with it. This has been this administration working alongside the company to make the improvements which have been made. Simple as that. So let's be absolutely clear about this. And you know, when we do deliver good stuff like this, it's quite interesting how the opposition try to claim responsibility somehow for a part of it. Maybe because they asked a question here or made a challenge there, but you know, actually the people who've done the work, it's Dave and the directors and all the people we've been talking about have been motivated to do this.
I'm sure Sandra is probably going to hold to her original position. All I would say is this, that failure is an orphan, success is a family photograph. So I dare say we'll all be taking, we'll all be part of that picture according to our lights. James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I just need to, I'm sure Councillor Starr would like to correct the record, but in terms of this opposition councillor, I voted to support the company at all stages, sometimes perhaps against my better judgment, but I'm pleased with the success that is now being shown. I'm also like to, I think, highlight the work of the Audit Committee as well in terms of its work of holding the company to account and holding the council to account, or councillors and the directors. So it certainly is turning out to be a good news story, and I'd like to thank the work that Dave and his colleagues have done on that, but it certainly wasn't without its challenges. Thank you.
So thank you very much, James. I know your group was split on the issue, but I mean, what I would say is we're all on the same page. We all will look forward to positively supporting the work of NRL going forward into 2021, and add our thanks to everybody who's put their backs into this, and particularly the work that Dave has been able to do, as it were, in the front line on this issue. But it's been a success, a corporate success, with strong corporate engagement and strong political engagement in different parts of the structure, at the executive level, scrutiny level, and audit level. Okay, can we agree the recommendations? Great, okay, and so we're on the last item above the line now. I am minded, once we've had that discussion, to see whether anyone wants to go below the line, but let's go on then to item 12, and that's in the name of Councillor Maguire. Yeah, you're live.
Thanks, Chair. This is in many ways just a kind of procedural item in order to make clear how and why we've arranged spending in order to respond to the Everybody In initiative. The item itself is cost neutral as it works out to the City Council, as all the sums are funded from external sources. You'll recall the splendid work of our officers in March, who, since the inauguration of Pathway 2.5 years ago, have continued to use creative and innovative ways of providing, first, emergency accommodation for rough sleepers, and then secondly, longer term. During lockdown 1.0, we provided emergency accommodation for 149 people, and perhaps more importantly, we were able to provide 125 of those people with stable and settled accommodation. That's over 80% of the people that we brought in, and that's because of the way in which our officers dealt with the challenge. The people involved are some of the most vulnerable members of our community, and we wish to continue to provide safety and security for them. And in keeping up that momentum, we have to move quickly as this kind of accommodation that we're seeking is at a premium. We're operating in a very constrained economy. And that's the reason why the paper that's before you asks Cabinet to approve the awards set out, as set out in the paper, to award contracts within budgetary constraints, both retrospectively and for the future, to allow this work to continue. The paper also asks for delegation for awarding a contract or contracts for further emergency provision in the first half of the next civic financial year. Delegation will be to the relevant director in consultation with the pertinent Cabinet member, again as set out in the paper. Once again, Chair, I wish to acknowledge and thank the work of our first-class, nationally recognised officers. Their innovative, creative approaches to helping these, the most vulnerable people in our society, is something for which the Council is justly proud.
I'm sure we will echo all of those remarks, Councillor Maguire. Thank you very much. Chris, is there anything you would like to, actually first, Gail, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think Kevin summed that up very nicely, but I'd like to echo my thanks to the whole team, because they've been absolutely phenomenal in these last 3 months. They always have been, but you know, they've really had to work very, very hard, and they've done some really creative pieces of work. So thank you.
Thank you. Chris and Lou, any comments you would like to start or comment?
Nothing from me.
Nor from me, thank you, Leader.
Okay, well, it's a perfectly formed policy in a report, so that's good. Before we go to, well, no, let's take any other comments. Any other Cabinet members? I'll start with James. James, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Only that you know, the team really have been doing some excellent work over the last few months in very challenging circumstances, and yeah, when I got the call to say that this needed to be authorised as a late item to Cabinet, it was one that came with, without any questioning, such as the importance of getting this and to be able to continue providing this service. So yeah, I think it's a very good piece of work, and that we're able to do in the community. Thank you.
Well, thank you for facilitating its appearance as the last item on today's agenda, James. Sandra.
And nothing to add apart from a thanks to Chris Hasted, who I see for the first time in picture. I've had endless phone conversations with you, so hello and thank you.
All right, okay, so you're bonded by Zoom, that's great. Right, can I ask Cabinet colleagues, do we need to go below the line for the green paper on this report? Can we indicate that we're happy not to go? Do you need us to put our hands up? No, we don't on this occasion. Okay, so we're not going to go below the line, but we are going to take the recommendations on page 153, the award of the contracts and the necessary delegated authority. Could everybody indicate, please, if they're in favour of those recommendations?
Come on, Councillor Kendrick. Thank you.
Councillor Kendrick sweeps in. You're having well trained, Alex. There we are.
I had an excuse this time. Dave Shaw's lost his pass, and I had to give him my pass. So I did have an excuse this time. The other time I was just asleep. But
okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay. Done all that. Look, it's been a very substantial agenda tonight, but a very positive one. A lot of successes as we go into the new year, a lot of challenges as well. I'd like to thank everybody who has been involved this evening. And if there are any members of the public who have stayed with us till 7 o'clock, can I add to my have a great Christmas, a good rest and a happy new year to people who are watching and to everybody around the table. So thank you very much. And that ends the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.